It won't surprise you to know that I watched 13 Reasons Why when it came out. Girl in her late teens with no diagnosed mental health issues watches the show that romanticizes mental illness? Yes, stunning, I know, right? Insane. Groundbreaking. That's right, me and my cousin, Andy, for a reason that completely evades me, watched it in unison back during my university days and then reconvened after every episode to chat about our thoughts on it, which was extra funny when I mentioned my plan to cover this on Twitter, and he then asked me if I'd ever even watched the series. Thanks, Andrew. Can't believe we debated mental health over a plate of turkey dinosaurs and rice. So the first time I watched 13 Reasons Why, I was pretty torn. On one hand, this show is like a gripping what's next of misery porn, and I love misery porn. Centered around one young girl called Hannah Baker who absolutely just cannot catch a break. It's like watching your tone-deaf boss that you mostly dislike hop up onto the karaoke stand to sing "We're Breaking Free" from High School Musical. It's just this disaster that unfolds before your very eyes that you just cannot look away from. And even if you can't directly empathize with the story or characters, you will probably find something in 13 Reasons Why that tugs at your heartstrings, even a little bit. On the other hand, this show is like an emotionally manipulative, sulky, hot mess that took every mental health buzzword in the book and just ended up using them like punchlines to a cruel joke, while said woman, who cannot catch a break, cries beautifully and tragically in the corner, escalating to these ridiculous heights over the 4 seasons? I don't even know, but we will find out together. The thin facade of mental health awareness is often overshadowed by the show's pathological need to shock and create controversy, completely scrubbing any good faith with an audience of any level of critical awareness. Also, it's a bit shit. Even without going into the critical analysis we'll pour through throughout the course of this video, 13 Reasons Why is dreadfully paced and more something I would describe as tonally sulky than actually gritty, interesting, or deep. It's sad, and it's annoyed that you aren't sad, so it lays it on real thick and gets frustrated when you're not crying at the end of every act. 13 Reasons Why is the person in the friendship group who constantly makes comments like, "I know you guys won't invite me. Who would ever want to spend time with me?" And you're like, "Man, I like you about 6 out of 10, right? You know, you're not my best friend, but I like you. But now you keep whinging at me and putting all this manipulation on me to invite you to places, and it makes me not want to invite you, but then that just proves you right. This dynamic is a loss for me no matter what I do." Despite that, on a surface level, purely turn your brain off and observe viewing, this is a fairly compelling show, and if that's what you like, just staring at a screen and hearing words and watching colours and shapes flash up, all the more power to you. But as I'll discuss throughout this video, this show was utterly desperate to capitalise on the increasing awareness and acknowledgement of mental health and relationships in young adult and popular media, arriving on scene shortly after hits like BoJack Horseman and Marvel's Jessica Jones, both also Netflix series if you recall. There was big money in mental health television in the last decade, and Netflix was there to soak it all up. Now, I'm not going to suggest at any point that this show shouldn't exist. I am, however, going to highlight what a cautionary tale of crap writing it is, that we can kind of pick apart and learn from, and maybe have some fun doing that. Because, you see, something weird happened, and this hasn't happened to me with any other television. Normally, I stop watching a show, kind of let it sit with me for a bit and form opinions as I gain distance from it, leaving it in my rear view like that time I accidentally left my brother at a welcome break near Leicester. With 13 Reasons Why, the moment I stopped watching, and I do mean the moment, I realised something. It was kind of shit. Cold, wet shit. So, what else to do besides make a video on it? In fact, this video was a Patreon community goal. I ended up writing this as I sat in the waiting room at Peterborough train station, after my train got cancelled and I had 2 hours until the next one. It was -1 degree Celsius. 2 women kept standing so close to the automatic doors that they opened. I was very cold. Anyway, if you'd like to check out Patreon community goals, vote for next projects, see upcoming work early, get access to behind the scenes content, see my 5-minute review series, check out the link in the description. Future goals, including scouring the disturbing movie Iceberg, covering the Nier Automata series, which I kind of hate, and unpacking the entire FromSoft series, are also there. There are other social media links too if you're interested. I might even start a Tumblr like I had when I was a teenager. But yeah, thank you to my patrons for making this happen. With a special thanks to Sam Jones, Julia, and Carissa Fulcher for being my highest tier patrons. This one's for you guys. And if you like the video, please make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Tell me your 13th reason. Incorrect answers only, please. My 13th reason is Tom Cruise's weird middle tooth. Anyway, let's get started. My original plan was to go through each episode one by one, describe and unpack, but on rewatch I very quickly found that this show drags like nothing else. See, there are 13 reasons, if that wasn't obvious, and so naturally they were like, let's give it one episode per reason, 1 hour per episode. So we get a 5-hour story told to us over 13 hours, and you can see how things might end up being paced. Moreover, a lot of this show isn't that bad, as we'll discuss, but in my opinion, season 1 delivers some of the worst insights into mental health I have ever seen. Now, let's give you some background. Then we'll dig into some analysis, and I'll raise a few points on how this show went so horribly wrong. If that's not your jam, if you don't really like video essays or lots of analysis, then go away. What are you even doing on this channel anyway? Go and put some Lego up your ass, chew on the pack of crayons you got for Christmas. Waste my time. Christ. And for those of you who remain, we're going to be covering the entirety of season 1 today, so a quick content warning for discussions of suicide, mental health, sexual abuse, and just generally upsetting shit. If that is not your jam, please feel free to skip this one. Absolutely valid. For the 5 of you that are left after that gauntlet of audience elimination, let's reboot my fossilized Netflix subscription and get to work. So 13 Reasons Why has 2 central characters, Clay Jensen and Hannah Baker. Get it? Cause like you bake clay? Clay Jensen is more or less, if not entirely, our protagonist. Played very well indeed by Dylan Minnette, Clay is a bit of an outcast at school. He has people he's friendly with, but no super close friends. We see him spending most of his time by himself, but it doesn't seem to bother him. On the other end of the spectrum we have Hannah Baker, and she's quite different from Clay, because she's dead. Hannah died shortly before the season began, and despite appearing in visions and flashbacks across the season, she is never seen alive in the show in present time. Hannah Baker is a student at the same school as Clay, having moved to the area 2 years before her death. Her parents own a small pharmacy, and although she has one local friend, her best friend Kat moves away just a few weeks after Hannah arrives, leaving her to take her first steps into a new school by herself. A few years later, Hannah's dead, having taken a razor to her arms in the bathtub and died in a way I can only imagine is very long, painful, and very lonely. So, what happened? Well, that's what this show seeks to explore with us. Shortly before her death, Hannah recorded and left a series of cassette tapes, each side of each tape dedicated to a different reason. These 13 reasons all being individuals rather than like less tangible issues like self-esteem or budget. Recorded in the crispest studio quality I've ever heard, no weird clicking when your mouth gets too dry or too wet, no weird breathing between takes, no mistakes and redos, just crisp. Every individual is connected in this show, and rather than having these issues be standout problems, with a few exceptions, they more show a cause and effect and how these problems built upon one another until the weight was too much to bear. I rewatched series 1 while writing this video, obviously. I've not seen it in like 6 years. It would be pretty Olympian to try and write a review off the back of that time skip. But in terms of the heinous shit this series could pull, season 1 is by far the most okay. It sets some terrible foundations, which we'll discuss as we go, but by and large the story is good. It's very bittersweet, and even on a rewatch, several moments had me crying. Regarding 13 Reasons Why, this is the best it's going to get. Probably because, from what I can gather, the following 3 seasons weren't planned from the beginning, meaning these showrunners had to take a very cohesive ending and suddenly drag it out for another 36 hours of content, which went about as well as you'd expect. Narratively, it's actually pretty great. The cast is big enough in number to have loads of dynamics going at once, but without being overwhelming. The dialogue is cringe, but in a natural teenage way. The chemistry flows, and everyone works well within the story. As a story on its own, this show is definitely not that bad. But number 1. The show nails the nitty-gritty, but falls flat overall. So while the entire bloated plot of this series isn't necessary for you to know, you're gonna need the general gist before we cover the rest of the seasons in the show so you have half an idea of what's going on. So I will cover it nice and quick here, while discussing it generally so that we don't have to awkwardly backtrack later. As you know, Hannah arrives on scene, and in one of the first acts as the tragically beautiful and eternally suffering female protagonist, Hannah goes to a party. Here, we meet the bulk of our cast, but one gentleman in particular. Reason number 1 was Justin Foley. Yes, the origin of that smile, that damn smile meme. Hannah, in her words, falls in love. It's quite sweet. Hannah is, on the whole, very well written, and most of that comes in through her relatability. She wants to give the impression of being a carefree and disinterested manic pixie dream girl, and in order to give this carefree and disinterested impression, she goes to extreme lengths to manufacture chance encounters with Justin wherever possible, just so she can say whatever and flick her her hair a lot. She prints off his school schedule so that she can accidentally bump into him on his way out of class. She suddenly takes an interest in watching basketball so that she can show up to one of his games. I mean, it's kind of weird, but he very obviously loves it when she appears out of thin air. He gets all giggly and shy and he can't stop smiling. If he wasn't into it, yeah, Hannah, maybe back off, but he's so down and he's so boyishly excited whenever they run into one another. The chemistry between the two of them is palpable and adorable. We've all been there. Hannah recounts that after heading out to the park after dark to meet Justin and just being little goofballs, she describes that the two of them kissed on the slide. We see a rendition of events in Clay's mind where things get far more heated, and Hannah goes, "Did you hear something else? We just kissed." Turns out that in the heat of the moment, Justin took a photo of Hannah sliding down the slide, accidentally snatching an upskirt photo in the process, with the flash on and all. That is a low angle flash on photo, man. That would kill me. When one of Justin's classmates, Bryce, sees the photo, it immediately gets sent out en masse, and the entire school thinks Hannah got porked on a children's playground. Cue one of those hilarious instances in teen drama shows where our main character is sat in class and all these phones are going off around her at full volume and they all have the default text ringtone. Like, you're really telling me not one person at that school has banana phone? Honestly, it's cringe as shit, but it's actually kind of real for it. How many of us can say we've sat there stuck in a classroom watching the joke spread through the faces of people around us? That jolt of hot panic, the flush, the adrenaline, watching the faces of your classmates light up around you as whatever it is gets passed between them, hoping for a lucky break and just knowing it's not coming, knowing that if you get up and run out, it'll make things 100 times worse, so you just have to sit there and pretend that you're not bothered and obviously fail. This first season was actually really relatable. You can sit and unpack it with me here together. I mean, I'm gonna do it anyway, whether you're here or not. In fact, I actually can't fault the first episode at all for how it set things up. I mean, I would absolutely love to fault this first episode, but I can't. It's pretty good. This show does a fantastic job of humanising Justin from the get-go. Despite him being the source of Hannah's problems, the atom split that catalysed years of bullying, he does what he does to Hannah because he's pathetically insecure. He's not a good person, no, but by the same merit, he's like a lot of young men. Justin suffers immense pressure from his classmates to fit a certain mould, and that mould just so happens to involve treating women like shit. So he sabotages a very genuine connection he has with a young woman for the sake of looking cool and over it and unattached. You see how torn he is between the extreme guilt he feels, and you see that he sees no need to rectify that. Spoiler alert, Justin never apologizes throughout season 1, to Hannah or Clay. He never shows remorse, he never feels bad, which is exactly how it goes. People get bullied as kids and go on with their lives expecting this Hollywood ending, where the bad guy finally says sorry and it's all perfect again, but it just doesn't happen. Justin doesn't have that moment of realization. There's never a shred of introspection from him. Some stories just don't have happy endings, and Justin is not only a very frustrating one, but also a very real one. And with her reputation in the mud from day one, we meet reason number 2, Jessica Davies. The star of Tape 1 Side B is a young woman called Jessica Davies, described immediately as Hannah's former friend, so we know how it ends, but how does it start? This segment of the show is weaker than the raging start we had with Justin Foley, but as we'll come to discover, when you have to invent 13 reasons for the sake of a story, some of those reasons just don't pan out as consistently. So Jessica joins the same school as Hannah at the same time. Her dad is in the Air Force, meaning Hannah often has to move house and have fresh beginnings, which is really stressful for her. She and Hannah hit it off and begin going to a coffee shop after school called Monet's, where they talk about how difficult it is being two new girls in a school full of people who have known each other for years. They lean on each other for support, having both bore the brunt of rumours and smears on their reputation before. Side note, as an adult looking back, it is wild that rumours and reputation was such a thing at school. School was like walking on eggshells. Hannah recounts that, after making friends with a guy called Standall, who we'll discuss next, Jessica and Alex stopped showing up, and so Hannah was left to sit at Monet's after school by herself until she too gave up. So this reason is initially pitched to us not so much as the presence of bullies, but the absence of friends. Jessica and Alex make new friends. Jess gets in with the popular kids, Hannah is left by herself, having not yet made her own friends. We see this manifest when, after Hannah commits suicide, her parents go to clean out her locker and they find it empty. No stickers, no photos, just school books. But when Clay Jensen goes to speak to Jessica about her tape, Jessica angrily remarks, "Don't believe everything you hear on those tapes. Hannah's Hannah's a liar. Hannah's actually the one who stopped going to Monet's first. We will see more insight into this when we discuss Alex's tape, but in the meantime, what is this segment trying to say? Who stopped going to Monet's first is never really explicitly told to us. Jessica never specifies, at least in series 1, and like in the eternal debate of who shot first, Han or Greedo, it changes the context enormously. Jessica and Hannah's retellings of events are now entirely thrown into doubt, except Jessica is the only one alive to set the record straight. But what does that suggest about Hannah? There are a few moments that I'll discuss more in depth as we go, where Hannah is either misinformed, or is kind of implied to have straight up lied. Sure, you know, when somebody's telling their own truth, they can misremember things, that's pretty normal. And yeah, you can accidentally get a few details wrong when you're trying to recount things from 2 years ago. That's fine. The details that Hannah misremembers are actually kind of harmless. But when it comes to Jessica, was Hannah abandoned by her lifeline? Or did she turn her nose up at it? It's not that important because she's dead, but it's still kind of an important distinction when we're evaluating everybody's behaviour in this show. I feel like it happened for the sake of adding twists and turns and injecting a little bit of drama to kind of spice things up, but ends up casting doubt on a woman who literally had nothing left to lose, and no reason to lie besides spite, I suppose. Things like this throw Hannah's suicide note into question, because anything she claims is hearsay, which is true for suicide notes, but like, really think about it. How much of a benefit do you expect to have from lying in one? Oh yeah, and also, episode 2 ends in the most random use of Woodkid's Run Boy Run I've ever heard. You'll be my boy, but for now it's time to run, it's time to run. Like, that song is not hard to fit into television. It's one of those perfectly paced songs that you can just smack on whenever somebody is panicking on screen or having to do something quickly. But man, this was a terrible use. Anyway, in the meantime, reason 3, Alex Standall. Hannah Baker meets Alex Standall during a hot chocolate session at Monet's with Jessica. They recognise Alex, some shy-looking blonde kid sat by himself, occasionally glancing over at the pair of them. Jessica suggests going over to chat with him, at which point Hannah remarks, he's alone, he doesn't have any friends, that's weird. And man, how quickly is it that the tables turn? But teenagers think like this, they do, even bullied teenagers. It's like how you're not supposed to dive into deep water to help a drowning person. Because apparently in their like life or death panic, they push you down, they try and climb on top of you, and they shove you under the water and can kill you in that way. It's like, people don't mean to be assholes like this. But I think something kicks in out of pure instinct when you just get a minute to breathe. I mean, you're still a dickhead if you do it. I've done it. I've been guilty of it. But it seems almost knee-jerk, like you don't even realise you're doing it at first. Keeping yourself from doing it is more of a learned behaviour. It's a harder approach and it takes time and effort to ignore the knee-jerk reaction, but it's worth the time and effort. The girls finally approach Alex and learn that he too is a new kid, and he joins their group. After a while, as mentioned in Jess's segment, they eventually stop going. Alex first, having found new friends, then, according to Hannah, off went Jess, then Hannah was by herself. An undisclosed amount of time later, Jess asks Hannah to meet her at Monet's, where she finds Jess in a furious state. Turns out that she and Alex broke up because Alex was too pushy sexually, trying to impress the popular boys, and feeling that same pressure that Justin felt all that time ago. After their breakup, again feeling the weight of school politics, Alex wrote a list. On that list was best ass and worst ass. Under best was Hannah Baker, and under worst was Jessica Davies. Whoops. Jessica is furious, not with Alex of course, but with Hannah Baker, who, on the back of the easy reputation Justin so kindly bestowed her with, Jessica now assumes Alex had some kind of fling with. She slaps Hannah hard, and that's their friendship firmly in the ground. In the present, Hannah's parents find their list. Her mum insists that while it obviously isn't a huge issue in and of itself, it's obviously a symptom of the bullying, which is true, and as Hannah remarks, Alex, you put a target on my back. Like, it's not the list itself that's the issue. It's the reputation the list gives Hannah that now serves as justification in the minds of her schoolmates for the following acts that she will kind of suffer through. Hannah's dad, Classic, suggests that he's worried we might find something out about our daughter that we don't want to know, implying that Hannah, who might I remind you killed herself, being sexually active, might be bad news to him. Priorities, Mr. Baker. I mean, at least she's not gay, right? Which brings us on to reason number 4, Courtney Crimsen. Courtney Crimsen is introduced to us very early in the series, just as the show is highlighting to us the vapid fakeness of individuals following a suicide. Courtney runs into Clay, spouts some stuff about all needing to be there for one another more than ever, and following a brisk and superficial back and forth, she announces, "I'm glad we got to talk," and then just leaves again. You see, I think if Courtney didn't know Hannah, this kind of behaviour would be like a bit overzealous, but fine, you know? She's like head girl or something. She's basically like very high up in the school politically, right? So making a show of suicide awareness is probably expected by her. I mean, it's a bit intense, and as this show repeatedly points out, it is a bit too little too late. Courtney makes a memorial for Hannah Baker and lays out lots of flowers, but when Hannah's mum sees the shrine, she very snarkily comments, "Hannah hates roses." Like it's the zinger of the century, like this is the way she catches Courtney for being fake.
Anyone who knew Hannah would know that she hated roses.
But I mean, my friends don't know my favourite flowers. They're sunflowers, by the way. And did she somehow manage to secure a budget from the school, or did she buy them herself? Flowers are like really expensive. Flowers are stupid expensive. This whole display probably cost like more than $100. If Courtney and Hannah didn't know each other, this is a pretty thoughtful way to memorialize a stranger. For all the gotcha moments this show drops on Courtney, this one just felt kind of rude. But it's not so. Courtney and Hannah did know each other. They were very well acquainted, and when Hannah starts getting stalked by a person who takes photos of her outside her bedroom window, Courtney is very excited to help her catch them. One night, when Hannah's parents head out for dinner, the girls stay behind with the intention of using some torch that scares bears away to disorient the stalker. The two end up drinking some demon juice from a selection of alcohol in her parents' cupboard, forget what they're doing, then undress together in front of the very window the stalker takes photos of Hannah through, and then kiss for a while on Hannah's bed. The stalker takes a photo of this, and hearing the shutter click, the girls jump to attention and find it was a boy called Tyler taking these photos the whole time. The next day at school, Hannah confronts him in the dark room and he bizarrely asks her out. Hannah laughs at him, as she should, but in what I can only assume was some weird act of revenge, Tyler leaks copies of the photos all around the school. The thing is, nobody knows who is in the picture. That is, until the night of their school dance. Courtney, not wanting people to know she's gay, absolutely desperate to keep it a secret because she's worried about the shame and bullying that will follow her coming out, despite having two gay dads herself, is cornered by some of the ruder members of the student body who have figured out that it is indeed her in the picture. In her own words, since Hannah's reputation is already in the dirt, Courtney tells them that it is Hannah and another girl, and spins a whole thing about how Hannah shags anyone and everyone and hops into threesomes with whoever asks, and thus Hannah's bullying gets worse and Courtney gets out of a situation that might have involved her just being honest. Yeah, Courtney is actually kind of evil. But yes, Tyler, reason 5. So when we're introduced to Tyler, it's early on in the season. He's hanging out the window of the boys' bathroom, taking photos of the girls playing sports. So yeah, bit of a creep. God, not all men, sure, but definitely all Tylers. Anyway, as mentioned before, Hannah had a stalker. This stalker would take photos of her at night, walking back to her house, and then through her open bedroom window. The first night she hears him, she's so scared that she can't even close her curtains. She can't move. She's so upset. But like, on the fight, flight, freeze scale, I'm a hard freeze too, girly, but after that, surely you can keep them closed, right? Clay has the gall to ask Tyler why he never tried to ask Hannah out, and Tyler goes, "Why didn't you? I know you like her. I stalk everybody, remember?" And boy, God, that is ham. It's weird because that sentence is so emblematic of how kind of schizophrenic the tone is around Tyler. Like, he stalks her. He knows where she lives. He follows her everywhere. He's like this omnipresent threat. He takes photos of Hannah through the windows of her house. And from what we can gather, he goes to her house every single night and sits outside her house for hours, taking photos of her going in through her front door and then through her bedroom window. Like the exact same things every time. That means he spends a lot of time just devoted to following this woman everywhere. That's so weird. That's scary. It's an obsession that the show, like, basically ignores. It's a side story to, like, a weirdly more narratively relevant kiss between Courtney and Hannah. It's played for laughs. It gives way to his weirdness and his awkward mannerisms. To the point where Tyler's history of stalking, his literal crime, it feels more like an afterthought, injected into a story about the quiet kid. Yeah, the kids go to his house and throw rocks through his windows, but I mean, It's weirdly downplayed. Speaking of crime, as the story wears on, we see Tyler collecting guns. He's got a bunch of photos of all the people who were ever mean to him. He gets bullied at school and he starts staring dead-eyed at people. In the final few minutes of the final episode, it is implied that he plans to shoot up the school, which kind of spits on the story being about Hannah, but okay. Now, reason number 6. Marcus. Marcus at first doesn't seem like he should be part of the band of troops. I mean, he's cagey as all hell about Clay having access to these tapes and potentially ratting them out, but so is Courtney, and her misgiving is, relative to the others, not exactly murder. Anyway, the school runs $1 Valentine. You pay $1, you answer a series of questions, and you get a list of your top 5 matches back. Marcus gets Hannah, so he gives her a call and invites her on a date, and she accepts. Hannah shows up to the location Marcus suggested, a diner, and buys a milkshake. She waits and waits and waits, and he eventually shows up 1 hour late, and with an entourage of jocks from school who sit at a neighbouring table and just watch them talk, which is so weird. They whisper to one another about how he keeps them waiting 60 minutes because he knows they'd be down to shag if they were still there after that time, which is a bit of a push. I'd wait an hour to be polite if I had a milkshake. 2 hours if it was an Oreo milkshake. Doesn't mean I'm down to provide wetty, with or without neck. Marcus randomly tries to put a hand up Hannah's skirt after speaking to her for about 15 seconds. She shouts at him to go away and he angrily insists, "I showed up because I heard you were easy," before storming out, friends in tow. He's like Gascon, what on earth? And that's it, I think. Marcus's reason comes out of nowhere and is just immediately forgotten. He behaves this way with no one else, and besides being horrendously two-faced, displays no other really negative behaviour throughout the show. He's mainly there to give Zach a reason to slide in, but it's not like it would have been impossible to arrange Zach's entrance into the story any other way. It's just a weak storyline and a weird inclusion. Now, let's talk about a better one. Reason number 7, Zach Dempsey. We first encounter Zach playing the driest first-person shooter I have ever seen. Honestly, so much of this show is so well researched, grounded in lived experience, and yet we've got Far Cry poo here. What is that mobility? Anyway, when the dust clears on Marcus, literally as he storms out of the diner, Zach Dempsey sits with Hannah and tries to make her feel a little bit better. It doesn't work. I found this scene very frustrating. Zach seemed genuine and like he actually wanted to help Hannah feel better, but with a bit of reflection, I assumed I might be feeling similarly to Hannah in her position. Zach might just very well be trying to take advantage of her vulnerability, so yeah, fair enough. And she may well be justified in that fear, being that when he asks her out in a way he can't help but word so badly, referring to her as not just having a nice ass but so much more, Hannah briskly but laughingly rejects him. And like any spoiled child, Zach doesn't take very kindly to it. I think one of the most genuine and well choreographed parts of this entire show is how Zach responds to rejection, with pettiness. And this pettiness manifests so brilliantly. He doesn't do some Carrie-style move with this loud bang of humiliation in front of a crowd of jeering students. He does it in a small but soul-crushing way. Members of Hannah's class each have a compliment bag, an initiative by the school intended to help spread goodwill between students. These are kept on racks in the classroom and you can check them daily. Zach is so upset that he starts to raid Hannah's compliment bag every day for weeks and weeks, stealing the very few nice notes she received, which, spoiler alert, are mostly from Clay. In response, Hannah writes Zach a letter, a very honest letter. She becomes vulnerable, opening up massively, getting it all out on paper, doing a fantastic overshare, partly because she wants him to understand the gravity of what he's doing by severing what seems like a minor link but is actually a lifeline, and partly because she's lonely and she has nobody else to tell these problems to. Hannah tells us in the tapes that Zach looked her in the eye, balled up the paper and threw it on the floor, and that's one of the many things that shoved her hard towards her suicide, one of the actual final straws. But we see in the present day that Zach still has the letter in his wallet, all the time being so overwhelmed by everything Hannah shared that he was too scared to do anything. He was paralysed by inaction. Zach offers to let Clay read the letter, presumably to share the burden of what's on there, and help him find someone to shoulder his incredible feelings of guilt about the fact that he got probably one of the clearest warnings ever about Hannah's suicide and did nothing out of fear. Clay refuses, abandoning Zach to grapple with these feelings himself, and Hannah, in her narration, observes that Zach is probably just as lonely as her. This section starts really strong by giving what I think is a very organic and spoilt reaction to rejection. But it just kind of nosedives really hard when it tries to find a conclusion. The show, it wants Zach to be punished. This is about Hannah getting to see the payoff of her act. But in my honest opinion, I feel like Zach just made a mistake. I think he was an asshole for what he did to Hannah, but I don't imagine that he had any idea that his actions, combined with those of many other people, would actually lead to her suicide. And yeah, that's kind of what this show is all about, but the show kind of punishes him for it in a way that I don't think is that fair. We're there to point out what we were supposed to do in the past to prevent the present, but punishing people for the actions of the past kind of defies that message a bit. They shove him into the same kind of like emotional abandonment that Hannah had and dismiss his feelings completely, which just reeks of hypocrisy. Like, what's the deal here? Collective responsibility? Being there for each other no matter what? Forgiving and supporting everybody? Caring for mental health as a community? Or is this kind of treatment only afforded to people who are tragically beautiful and innocent and have made like no mistakes in their life whatsoever? Because Zach is, I think, 18 years old. He's faced with terrifying news from a girl that he didn't really know that well, and having had no prior experience with situations like that, being surrounded from birth with people who push their emotions down and aren't honest with each other about what they're feeling. Like, he just didn't know what to do, and he hid from it. Hannah misremembered Zach's response, assuming he threw the note away when he didn't, and it was kind of one of her final straws. But Zach still doesn't deserve support? Now, onto a guy I always forget is even a reason. Number 8, Ryan Shaver. Ryan Shaver is a footnote in this show. Like Marcus, he's not foreshadowed, and once his section is over, he's basically forgotten, besides hopping on scene to make sassy comments every now and again, and insist that Courtney needs to stop pretending that she's straight. He's quite funny. I'm not bewildered by his inclusion, I'm just confused as to why the show spent so little time characterizing him, and then developing his characterization beyond this single episode. So when wandering around a careers fair, Hannah gets invited to a poetry club by a man who actually really likes her and wants to be friends. This fellow even sees her on the day she commits suicide, and he's like, "Oh hey Hannah, I've not seen you around lately. How have you been? Let's hang out sometime." And she just brushes him off, goes home, and does the deed. Which is a really weird conclusion, considering the number of characters who voice a desire to have just had a chance to speak to her before she did it. Is the show trying to demonstrate that it wouldn't have worked? I don't know. I can't figure out why they included this. They very easily could have left it out. Anyway, Hannah arrives at the poetry club to see a guy from her school called Ryan Shaver, a man she describes as a selfish, arrogant snob. But he's quite nice to her, and he nurtures her writing ability. When she asks for his help with poetry, they sit down together and work hard together on bringing out her talent, and she opens up to him. But one day she writes a sick poem, and Ryan wants to put it into the school magazine, Lost and Found, and when Hannah says no, he gets very pushy. She goes into school the next day to find out that he's done it anyway. Everybody knows that it's her poem, and even her English teacher begins to discuss it during class while everybody looks at her and laughs. She ends up telling Ryan to clear off, and I don't think they speak again. I get it. I think opening up to somebody and sharing difficult feelings with them, only for them to broadcast it to a school full of people when you have explicitly told them no, is a very valid reason to be upset with them. I just feel like Ryan is very under-characterized in light of this. He's one of those characters where, like, their personality type is gay, and sometimes they say funny stuff, and that's it, you know? That's their inclusion. During this tape's episode, all of the characters in the cast spent ages telling Ryan how, like, stubborn and rude and snobby he is. Which I feel is, like, solely with the intention of not having to show any of this in action. Beyond Hannah's flashbacks. Which is a shame, considering the sheer amount of fucking around Clay spends all of his time doing in all of the episodes. We 100% could have wedged in a good few scenes of showing Ryan being a bit of a dick. Ryan is, in my opinion, the least fleshed out character in the show, and he could have been a lot more. He's a very interesting character. Like, why is he snobby and stubborn and arrogant? Is he bullied himself? Why does he go to the poetry club? Where does his inner voice come from? Okay, so moving on to reason 9. Reason 9 is technically Justin Foley again, but we'll kind of touch on this later. And reason number 10 was a girl called Sheri Holland. So, Sheri's is probably one of the most egregious acts of the show. Sheri offers to drive Hannah back from a party because she's drunk. Sheri seems sober, the show isn't quite clear on it, but on the way back she tries to grab a phone charger from her bag and accidentally hits a wooden stop sign on the side of the road, knocking it down. Hannah sees this and very melodramatically announces that they need to call 911. Which, I mean, yeah, it is a stop sign, it's very dangerous, but Sheri refuses because she doesn't want to get in trouble and drives away. But I mean, you can call and report a broken sign without telling telling the police that you hit it. Sheri could even drive a few hundred feet down the road, and Hannah could pretend she saw it while walking home. Hey, look who arrived while I was recording. This is going right in the jar, I think. I don't know, I guess they're both drunk, but this is mega tenuous. Especially for Sheri, who is, like, really kind and sweet throughout the whole series. You could say she's, like, just showing her true colours now, but I don't think so at all. This was just so left field. Specifically just to manufacture the accident that came afterwards. So, Clay's friend Jeff drives home sober, doesn't stop at the intersection as the sign is broken, hits another car, and dies on scene. There's a bunch of beer bottles on the floor of his passenger side, so everybody assumes he was drunk driving, and despite Clay insisting he knew Jeff was sober, it still casts Jeff's innocence in uncertainty. Once Clay learns the truth through the tapes, he goes to see Jeff's parents to explain, but it obviously doesn't fix anything or bring their boy back. It doesn't even really help the fact that people assume Jeff was drunk. The scene is very sad and very well done, but it's also trite, in my opinion anyway, especially since Clay isn't even telling them the whole truth. I think the show is trying to tell us that as we're looking at things in hindsight, well, yes, it does usually allow you to learn from things and recognize mistakes, such as with Hannah's domino effect leading to her suicide. In the case of Jeff, I mean, a series of unforeseeable events led to it, and he was entirely ignorant of what was happening around him. I mean, it's a road accident. I don't know. In the moment Clay visits Jeff's parents and finds some kind of closure with them, I felt like the show was trying to make parallels to Hannah's parents and demonstrate the impact of being honest about the situation, but it didn't really work, at least to me. There were a few ham-fisted metaphors in this show, but we'll get to them later. Speaking of ham-fisted, Reason 11 was kind of Clay Jensen. So Hannah begins this tape by welcoming Clay to the tape and ends this tape with an X-Factor style cliffhanger moment before she concludes, "You do not deserve to be on these tapes, Clay. You are not the reason, but you needed to be here to understand." Which I felt was quite cruel. The boy's not been sleeping properly for weeks. Surely you could have just CC'd him in. Anyway, reason number 12, Bryce Walker. So now it gets kind of ridiculous, because when I saw Bryce stride into episode 1 with not one but 2 popped collars, I knew he was going to be our 2D evil villain man with no characterization who is evil because we say so. Justin Foley gets 2 episodes to best understand his character's direction. Bryce gets, what, a big house and a rich dad? A lot of people in the show claim that they warned Hannah about Bryce, but strangely you never hear he's a horrible sexual harasser and abuser of women, or he's very rapey, or never be alone with him, Hannah, he abuses women and he will abuse you too. It's more jokey stuff along the lines of like, oh my god, he's like a frat boy Darth Vader? Girly! Our first run-in with Bryce occurs in a corner shop shortly after Hannah is branded as best ass, when Bryce grabs her ass and confirms that it is real tight, which is very cringe, as intended of course. Bryce continues to just haunt her like a horny poltergeist, occasionally showing up in other scenes to look confused as he's not heard the tapes himself yet, or to leer menacingly at men and women alike with those beady little eyes. But for a man who Hannah remarks destroyed her soul, he's absolutely the most basic character out of all of them. And when we have edgy shows with 2D villains with no redeemable qualities or even a minute of characterization, how do we show that he's actually super duper evil? Yep, he rapes Hannah. Oh no, wait, sorry, he rapes Jessica Davies and then he rapes Hannah, the 2 women in the show. By this point in the series, if you've been watching, the shock value has, certainly ramped up. It's all very extreme. From the car accidents to Jessica's unconscious rape, to Hannah's completely sober final straw pre-suicide rape. It's organic ramp up, but in the scenes I felt as like the show had quite firmly moved away from starting a dialogue and shedding light on real events. The writing was more hard focused on just being controversial. And we will talk about this later as well, because I have a lot to say on it. Anyway, I have 2 reasons for why I think Bryce's ultimate act was not the best move for the show to make, nor the best move for Hannah's character. Firstly, aiming to start some kind of dialogue about rape and sexual abuse could probably better be angled through somebody that Hannah actually trusted. God forbid, but Mr. Porter, Justin Foley, even Clay Jensen. People that Hannah roughly trusts and would realistically be alone with. The kind of instance where someone could be ultimately selfish, take what they want, and leave the victim confused and blaming themselves. Like, obviously the bad guy, but somebody Hannah wouldn't quite be able to accept as the bad guy. The audience would be screaming for blood, word, but Hannah would probably feel very conflicted for a very long time. Whereas Bryce is obviously the bad guy, his scene is token. If you watch the scene leading up to Hannah's rape in the hot tub, a lot of events happen simultaneously to result in Hannah immediately being left alone with Bryce Walker, and a lot of circumstances prevented her from being able to leave the situation immediately, which she does try to do, kind of. Sure, coincidences happen, but what is the point in starting a dialogue about coincidence? Oh yeah, so if you're stuck in a hot tub with a man who makes you uncomfortable, who seems to appear out of nowhere, and every single other person at the party vanishes at exactly the same time, like 50 people leave in one go, and are all completely out of earshot, and you can't get out of the hot tub fast enough, and he also restrains you in exactly the right way to stop you from moving, like, what kind of message about mental health is this? What kind of dialogue is this starting? Sure, Bryce is the bad guy in this situation, but regarding the message of this scene, I can't imagine what kind of dialogue is being initiated here. Just don't be in the situation when it happens? Just don't rape is a very obvious one, but no rapist is going to look at Bryce Walker and go, wow, he's just like me for real. I mean, why would you? Because he's had no character development. He's not relatable. No weird, gross frat boy is going to watch Bryce and see a character he admires and relates to, only to realise the crushing weight of his own attitude towards women in the final moments of the series. The scene relates to nobody, helps nobody, sheds light on nothing, and exists purely for shock value. A more impactful scene, and honestly a more helpful scene, would be one with somebody Hannah trusts, someone she cares about, or somebody who makes her feel cared about. Hannah being let down in an irredeemable way. Maybe a scene where she runs to tell her parents and her dad turns it on her. If you remember earlier in this video, the moment where he suggests we might find out something about our daughter we don't like, maybe she tries to tell her dad and he tells her she was asking for it. Sure, Mr. Porter tells her she was asking for it, spoilers, but he's a nobody to Hannah. There's none of the same impact of telling someone you trust completely and having them whack it back in your face. It would fuel the fire of the dad's guilt after the suicide as well. I just felt like for a huge climactic scene, and for the horrible shock value that it was, it could have been so much more, but it ended up stewing in long dead tropes. Speaking of long dead tropes, one of our weakest reasons was, unfortunately, reason number 13, Mr. Porter. See, in the final episode of season 1, Hannah admits that, after the other 12 tapes, writing it all down, reading it all aloud, pouring her heart out, she feels better. She magically feels alright, and she's going to give things one final go. Which, to me, was maybe a sign that she shouldn't kill herself, but whatever, I don't know how people think. Hannah says, if you're listening to this, he failed, and my fate is sealed. Hannah goes to the school counsellor, Mr. Porter, and starts to very tentatively drop breadcrumbs as to her situation. Like, I guess a lot has happened to her, and maybe she doesn't know where to start, but she gives him a shocking little amount to work with. He doesn't understand the gravity of what she's trying to communicate to him. I don't think I would. She starts with angles like, Clay Jensen hates me, which confuses Mr. Porter, because he remarks that he sees them hanging out all the time, and I would probably assume that they just had a little falling out as well. He tries to reassure her. I don't think Clay dislikes you, which is literally true. Clay is obsessed with her. She starts to get really annoyed with him and she tries to get up and storm out of the room, but he's like, no, stay, let's talk. And she sits down again. And yeah, okay, this is where Mr. Porter drops the ball. When Hannah tries to describe that something bad happened at a party, Mr. Porter's first suggestion is that she consented in the moment but regretted it later, which she is pretty rightfully horrified by. Yeah, Mr. Porter's not great. He basically says, well then go to the police or get over it, albeit a bit more gently than I phrased it, and obviously Hannah is horrified. Sure, these are often the choices we're faced with when dealing with harassment and abuse. This is often the unfortunate binary presented to us. There aren't a lot of options that you have, like, do you want justice or not? Do you want to try? But that's not the thing. Hannah just needs somebody to listen to her, and Mr. Porter just won't hear her out. He just doesn't care. So she gets up and she storms out, and as she goes this time, Mr. Porter answers his ringing phone. She remarks, I wish you'd come out and stop me, but like, he's already come out and stopped you once. He's already called you back as you were leaving this room the first time he tried to stop you. There are a lot of moments in this series where Hannah gets up and just walks out of the room and remarks on the tapes later in hindsight that in that moment she wanted them to turn around and pull her back in. There's a point where she and Clay finally kiss and things get heated and she gets overwhelmed and she starts crying and she screams at him to leave her alone, like over and over and over again. And when he does leave her alone, she's there on the tapes like, why did did you go? Ugh. We'll talk about this in a later section in more detail, but there are so many moments where she says months or even years after the fact that she wished that they would grab her and pull her back and talk to her, and it just apportions all this blame. Oh my god. Anyway, Mr. Porter is reason 13, but I just don't think that he should be. Sure, he's the only certified adult in the tapes, he's the school counselor, he's supposed to be that line of defense, but during the series he tells the headmaster that he has no specialized degree for this. Nothing was required to do this job, he just had like cursory training. Sure, it shines a light on the fact that counselors need better training, but to pin this blame on Mr. Porter is very excessive. Hannah literally remarks, if he fails, I will kill myself. But he's there for like, yeah, mental health issues, but to walk into his office and drop suicidal ideation on his plate out of nowhere, and then literally walk out an hour later and kill yourself, like, I feel like you've already made a decision if you kill yourself a few hours after trying this. And sure, he fucked it up, but it felt disingenuous in its presentation to me that a pretty mentally sound seeming woman can walk into his office, coherently try to explain the gravity of the situation, only get slightly tearful, and then just quietly get up and walk out of the room. I don't know. Yeah, sure, maybe when people have made the decision to end their lives, they do find a certain amount of calmness, but the show implies that this was her moment of choice. I feel like, I don't know. You know what I mean. I think a far more effective substitute here would be one of her parents or something, or Clay. One final letdown to surpass all letdowns, like a real final straw. In the present day, Clay asks Mr. Porter how he can even live with himself. Mr. Porter replies, I can know all the signs, all the issues, and still come up missing something. Clay snaps back, what about the next kid that kills himself? And the next? But like, man, Mr. Porter's only human, and he is right. We all know signs and issues, but Hannah's downward spiral was completely invisible to Clay, Tony, even her parents, who had no idea she intended to kill herself. Why is Mr. Porter the final chance? And why is he burnt at the stake because he didn't take immediate positive action in the 5 minutes Hannah gave him to notice what was wrong with her? I'm not suggesting it's Hannah's fault. I just don't understand why the show frames it as though it's Mr. Porter's fault for missing the signs when everybody around her missed the signs. So that's the story summarised with some of my more minor one-off issues and gripes. My conclusion so far is that the story does the nitty-gritty well, but the overall absolutely abhorrently. And as we will discuss towards the end of this video, this show does want to be seen as a show that is helping. It does want to be seen as guiding discussion and raising awareness. Often when I talk about mental health in video games and TV, I get a lot of comments from people that are like, why should a video game be faithful and honest about mental health? They are under no responsibility to accurately depict mental health or be honest about suicide. Why can't you just let entertainment be entertainment? And yeah, you know, as soulless and unempathetic as that comment is, sure, you know, let's just say all ethics and morals aside, all concepts of humanity and compassion completely detached, so let's just erode all of that, let's just wipe that away. From a purely business standpoint, media that doesn't claim to be about raising awareness for mental health isn't obligated to do those tropes well, you know? I mean, they are, but let's just say, empathy aside. But this show very explicitly tells us that they are here to help. But one step at a time, because we will be saving the best point for last. So, discussion. I think this show and its writers understand a lot about teenagers. It understands how bullying is a slow boil, it's about being in a vulnerable position, reputation usually comes first, bullying second. Rumours become reputation, and reputation justifies abuse, often. I remember when I was at school, I joined a school of people that already knew each other. I was boyish, awkward, and had weird habits like drawing dragons and making lots of lists. It also didn't help that I looked like an Oblivion character builder John Lennon. The reputation came first, weirdo, but it wasn't really the reputation that mattered. I remember my biggest ever fear at school was, wait for it, having a bird poop on me. I used to refuse to walk under trees, I carefully checked lampposts that I walked under, I wouldn't stand too close to rooftops, which tended to only compound the reputation, unfortunately, but it is what it is. And why? Well, because, for those of you who have been through it, when you're trapped in a pit of reputation brought upon you by bullying that you cannot climb out of, there's nothing you can really do. Ignoring bullying doesn't work, trying to to clap back or argue back doesn't work. Trying to make friends doesn't work. So you put your head down and you stay quiet and you try to get through it day by day. But again, when you have that reputation, it's the random acts out of your control that trigger the bullying. See, in 13 Reasons Why, the poem published by Ryan Shaver, for example, is an act out of Hannah's control. It's the bird poop. Because while the act itself is small, insignificant, easily ignored or cleaned up, it suddenly drops a massive spotlight on your head. All of the people who find you weird suddenly see you again. The bullying starts again. A random act of God dropping on your head and suddenly your life is hell for another week. I really appreciated the way this show framed bullying in this way. I know it made some of the reasons seem very trite and very random, especially Ryan's, but I loved the way it built up a bad reputation for Hannah. In her school, rumour was fact and fact was reputation, and that was it. That storyline to me, chef's kiss. Beautifully done, really thought-provoking. The real issue I think this show had is that it takes place after Hannah's suicide. Trying to look back on it, make sense, apportion blame whilst often coming across contradictory, using characters like Mr. Porter as stand-ins for entire systems, and solving them in 60 minutes, playing Tyler's behaviour for laughs, having Bryce be a cookie-cutter frat boy stereotype with little to no bearing on Hannah's life before he does what he does. It just felt flat. The show points all these fingers at people who led to Hannah's death, whilst also showing a good number of people who liked Hannah and were very kind to her. On the whole, except in moments where, for example, Clay is grieving Jeff's death and he isn't in a place to listen to Hannah. The library guy, for example, showed a huge interest and asked to hang out with Hannah on the day she died. The other members of the poetry club adored her and asked about her after she left. Even Jessica didn't seem to have that much of a problem with her. Hannah never shared her woes with her parents, but her mum utterly adored her consistently. Besides a short moment of conflict where Hannah loses some of her parents' money and they're upset with her, they have a brilliant relationship. The show pins the blame on so many people for Hannah's death, but it never tells us what Hannah needs in order to prevent her death. Number 2, Hannah, the tragic victim of a beautiful suicide. If you're familiar with the controversy around this show already, you'll likely be familiar with terms like romanticized suicide, because they've been flung around a lot. That's kind of because it's relevant. As I mentioned in the previous section, I think that this show really suffered by showing us the aftermath. The before is extremely strong, well written, grounded in a horrible school-time reality that is very real for a lot of people. But the after is, to coin an academic phrase, fucking stupid. I've got a few major gripes with the after, and I will name them for you now. Number 1, Hannah's suicide note is a dry-ass Joss Whedon-style narration. Number 2, Hannah seems to commit suicide entirely out of spite. And number 3, Hannah gets to sit and watch the results of her actions bear fruit. So when Clay picks up the tapes for the first time, he whacks one in and we immediately hear Hannah speaking to us, and Clay, I suppose.
Hey, it's Hannah. Hannah Baker. It's me, live and in stereo. Don't adjust your whatever device you're hearing this on. No return engagements, no encore, and this time absolutely no requests.
Get a snack, settle in, she says, and you can hear the dry smile on her lips. She goes, because I'm about to tell you the story of my life. It's such a record scratch. Yep, that's me. I bet you're wondering how I got here, so much that you forget it's a suicide note. If you're listening to this tape, you're one of the reasons why, Hannah explains. This tone perseveres throughout the entire season. All episodes have her voiceover, where she will casually drop the fact that the tapes are life-changing, but no spoilers, girly. Listen to them and your life will change forever, she insists, like she's about to read my palm. Not to be crass, but Hannah has a stunning amount of showmanship for a woman who is leaving notes in preparation for the violent and abrupt conclusion of her own life. She's good-humoured, she never breaks down, her voice never hitches, she never struggles. Sure, I imagine a lot of suicidal people don't sound suicidal, but to delicately piece together these tapes slowly over the course of a week without even a hitch of emotion is stunning in and of itself. Also, she must write for Screen Rant, because God almighty does this girl know how to drag things out with ever quite getting to the point. While I do think hearing a crying, hysterical teenager incoherently stumbling through a recollection of the last 2 years would make for difficult television, I do think this, plus her omnipresence throughout the show, combine to make a kind of suicide that isn't really death. More a transcendence to somewhere else, except you can still watch the fallout and be there to appear and just kind of observe the proceedings and enjoy all of the scheduled closure. It's like suicide light, diet suicide. In Hannah's mum's storyline, we see a cold, grey world and a space in someone's life that has very abruptly been vacated. But to everybody else, especially Clay, Hannah is still very physically present. Not only does he see her in moments that lead to flashbacks or during flashbacks, but there are also moments where he looks over and just sees her staring sadly and knowingly at him as he gets a better understanding of her trauma. Like, you can just die and then spend your time feeling satisfied when all the people that doubted you suddenly realise that you're right and perfect all along. I think for a show that tries hard to be grounded in very miserable reality, especially with the fairly accurate portrayal of bullying, these claims crumble in the face of Hannah's actual suicide. Hence why I thought the after was so crap in comparison. The thing is, this show literally wouldn't exist without the after. The show is all about examining the before and then looking at the after, and all of the things that caused the after, like, it's the point of the show. So to remove it would just be to completely rewrite it and actually probably detract from the point of it. But damn, it really does ruin something so brilliantly promising. And when a show pretends to be grounded in reality, I think it can be particularly dangerous to portray a reality in which a teenager can commit suicide and then kind of ascend to something that's like bigger than a ghost but smaller than a god. She's able to like wander around and observe the fallout while kind of getting her retribution from beyond the grave. Hannah gets to sit back and put her feet up out of the firing line and just kind of enjoy the direct consequences of her suicide. And she lets her tapes play out and the consequences, and she just gets to watch what happens to everybody who wronged her. But I do think it is worth remembering that, like, when you die, you know. And that's something the show seems to purposefully ignore for the sake of some cheap shots where Clay and Hannah look at each other all sadly. 13 Reasons Why portrays a death with catharsis and suicide that leads to meaningful resolution. Hannah commits suicide because she feels empty and alone, but the note she leaves is purely spiteful. She leaves nothing to her parents, nothing to Kat, nothing to Tony, no messages of love, no goodbyes, but 13 losers? Yeah, they get the closure. This show demonstrates a woman basically returning after death, either physically or through the eyes of the audience, to watch everybody be sad and miss her and make shrines to her, announce their love, admit they were wrong, talk about her. You get to watch people unravel like you did, which makes you feel better. Hannah has become the center of everybody's universe, but in reality, no. Even if somebody was to leave tapes, that's just not quite what happens. See, spite is a good motivator when you want to get moving, but it's a short-term thing. It doesn't inspire long-term change in yourself or the people you're trying to impact. If you're sitting in the past, desperate for the people who made you miserable to regret their actions and hate themselves and come crawling on their knees for divine forgiveness, you're going to find yourself in a very lonely, empty situation. Yeah, all these people were really shit to her, but what's the payoff now? Revenge? Like, you died so that somebody could feel bad about their actions for a bit? Like, is that what your life is worth? For a show that demonstrates many themes very well, I think the last thing you would ever want to do is show a bullied teenager that they can get all the closure and satisfaction they could ever want upon committing suicide, as you get to sit around in the afterlife and just kind of watch. It becomes a temporary state that you get to enjoy for a short period. Combine this with like the pretty tapes and their felt tip patterns, the manic pixie dream girl flashbacks, the dry-witted sarcastic narration, and we have this very clean and beautiful suicide. And why does it matter, you ask? I'm glad you did. Well, shortly after the release of the show, the National Association of School Psychologists released this statement. We do not recommend that vulnerable youth, especially those who have any degree of suicidal ideation, watch this series. Its powerful storytelling may lead impressionable viewers to romanticize the choices made by the characters and or develop revenge fantasies. They may easily identify with the experiences portrayed and recognize both the intentional and unintentional effects on the central character. Unfortunately, adult characters in the show, including the second school counselor who inadequately addresses Hannah's pleas for help, do not inspire a sense of trust or ability to help. Hannah Hannah's parents are also unaware of the events that lead to her suicide death. And as reported by the NPR, these concerns were pretty well founded. In the month following the show's debut in March 2017, there was a 28.9% increase in suicide amongst Americans aged 10 to 17, as published in the Journal of the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. That was hard to say. The spokesperson noted that the study conflicted with research published out of the University of Pennsylvania, but if you look closer, you'll see that the observations they made are kind of like pee-pee poo-poo. This particular study found that young adults aged 18 to 29 who watched the entire second season of the show reported declines in suicide ideation and self-harm relative to those who did not watch the show at all. But I mean, why are we prescribing teenagers the second season of a Netflix show to cure the harmful effects of the first? That's kind of a gamble. This is only exacerbated when we learn that in the 2007 novel off which this series was based, Hannah kills herself by swallowing a handful of pills. By contrast, the TV series originally included an intense graphic scene where Hannah slits her wrists in the bathtub. There's no music either, it's silent and incredibly impactful. Her parents find her afterwards and it is harrowing. Stunningly, this was a conscious choice. Both our consultants agreed vehemently with us that had we not shown the terrible, ugly, painful bridge from life to death for Hannah, then we'd have been glorifying suicide, Gorman told a journalist from Ars Technica. Haha, Ars. I don't think it's the absence or otherwise of the suicide scene that romanticizes the suicide personally, Gorman. I think the show romanticizes suicide and then shows one of the most triggering, difficult to watch scenes of all time. You get all these depressed teens thinking about the people that are gonna miss them when they're gone, and then you show them something that is gonna absolutely mentally destroy them. Good idea. 2 years after the show was released, 2 years, they ended up scrubbing the scene. I saw the scene, a lot of people saw the scene. It was far too late for any meaningful impact in my opinion. I mean, look at me, I'm alright, I'm mentally sound, I do okay. I get anxious about things, but I don't think about suicide, and even I walked away from the show with a dark cloud over my head. I thought about who would miss me, which conflicts I had that would magically find resolution, who might admit after the fact that they'd secretly liked me, and like, mentally sound person with a love of difficult stories, I am the target audience for this show. I think the reason I enjoyed the show so much each time around is because I am absolutely the intended viewer. I'm familiar with mental health, I'm very familiar with bullying, but I'm not intimately acquainted with depression and suicidal ideation. I'm hardly on, like, a knife's edge, you know? But one thing of note I did find about the show is that there appears to be a huge disparity in their, like, desired target audience and their real target audience. For me, for example, with my context, I responded as expected to all the story beats of 13 Reasons Why. I engaged with it as a piece of entertainment, albeit a difficult piece of entertainment at times. I felt the bullying very relatable, but also very difficult to watch. And the ending was as alien to me as I hope it was to most of you. It's just as fantasy a setting for me as Lord of the Rings. The romanticized suicide of Hannah Baker is there to tug at my heartstrings, while never really stepping any further in its message than bullying is wrong. And sometimes people need support and friendship. You know, I'm the kind of target audience that they can get away with that kind of shit with. But then you get the kind of people that the show insists it's the target audience for. Troubled teenagers, people who relate to Hannah, people to whom a discussion of these themes might help. And these are also the people who are directly impacted by what's on screen. And these are the kind of people that, to coin a phrase, you can't get away with completely fucking around, for which this season became some kind of cursed tape. So, number 3, what exactly is this show trying to shine a light on? Is it the vapidness of pretending to care in the wake of tragedy? Hashtag never forget. Play is actually fantastic. Anyway, scenes like this were supposed to be showing the shallow vapidness of how people pretend to care after a great tragedy. We all got bullied by a girl at school, one of the most spiteful, cruelest, lawless, evil people on the planet, who then went on to become a nurse and preach about mental health. It's the shared experience. This is that. The show is trying to communicate to us that the people who drove Hannah to suicide now give a superficial shit about her years too late. Later in episode 1, the cast sit in a classroom talking about how and where to ask for help if needed, and the classic fedora kid, Pratters, famous for his terrible takes, interrupts to ask if we can be done with this, isn't it healthy to move on? In one episode we're shown the vapid pretense of caring about tragedy, followed by the standard reactionary, you guys only pretend to care about tragedy response. Like, over-responding is too little too late, and also fake and cringe and gay, but anybody who is open about the reality of over-responding is like a fedora take. I guess the idea of the show is just to not have people commit suicide, but not everybody at that school would know that Hannah was on the verge of committing suicide. Some people can just feel bad about tragedy as well, you know, there's no need to gatekeep the appropriate amount of concern from people of appropriate social distance while also like decrying ambivalence. It's all very contradictory. How we're all responsible for someone's suicide? So this show uses a bunch of ham-fisted parallels to get across minor lessons here and there, but they just never seem to work. These allegories don't pay off. So here's one. A guy called Monty purposefully hits Alex with his car, knocking him down. Alex is absolutely furious, as anybody would be, and shouts at Monty. Monty mocks him, Alex gets him out of the car, they fight. Monty beats the crap out of him. Monty and Alex get pulled into a room with the student honor board, basically like a student court, and Courtney insists no one was at fault. I guess to show us how stupid an argument that is and to compare it to Hannah Baker's suicide, because obviously Monty was at fault. Monty goes, maybe I was driving a little fast, and Alex is like, I guess I'm just crazy, right? Which is meant to be a juxtaposition to the people who bullied and harmed Hannah, and Hannah going a little crazy while being pushed to suicide, but it's so stupid and the events just don't compare. The show walks this not very clever line where it's trying to suggest that blame can be apportioned for suicide. You know, the show suggests that we are, as a collective, responsible for everybody, which is kind of true, yeah. But to let somebody slip, intentionally or otherwise, is the direct result of the actions of the people around them, which isn't always necessarily true. But by the same merit, the show goes enormous lengths to show Hannah as this broken, beautiful, damaged woman who can be saved by love, which we'll get to, and who never asks for help. The counsellor tries to talk to her parents are there for her, and she ducks it. She refuses to speak to the people who would actually care the most, like her mum adores her, and it's kind of just for the sake of building drama within the show. If Hannah had actually spoken to any of these people, I do think that things would have gone very differently, but she very specifically doesn't. A lot of Hannah's issues sit on the back of miscommunication. Zach's crumpled note, whether it was she or Jessica that stopped going to Monet's, pushing Clay away at the party, but at the same time, Zach's struggle with his mental health following an event he could probably foresee but couldn't understand the gravity of until it was too late, and his associated guilt is brushed away. Alex's suicide attempt towards the end of the series isn't portrayed as a preventable tragedy, but rather a justifiable consequence of a situation, divine retribution. There's no cause and consequence for him. Tyler's bullying isn't given much time or sympathy either because he's the weird kid. There's a feeling that he becomes more dangerous as he gets more bullied, but wanting to stop somebody getting bullied because you're scared they're going to shoot up a school isn't the same as wanting to stop somebody from getting bullied so that they don't self-harm. And Clay getting dismissed by Tony when he tearfully remarks, I don't think I'm going to get through this, there's a degree of clean morality and its connection to justice in this show. So we look back into a window in the past and we see this preventable struggle, and then we look to the present and we see it reflected in so many characters, but they're also shown as not worth saving by the show because they did a bad thing. People in the show are only worth compassion when they have an entirely clean slate, and only tragic innocent people deserve grace, apparently. By the end of the series, Clay reaches out to a girl called Sky and offers to spend time with her as a way to show he's learned his lesson, but spoiler alert, by the start of season 2 they're already dating. She is his stand-in for Hannah and an opportunity to make amends for not trying with Hannah, rather than an individual with her own stuff going on. We never know what Sky has going on. That you can prevent suicide just by loving. The lingering affections of Clay are absolutely a factor in his own mental downturn, and we see the way he and Hannah became so close to being an item. But Hannah sabotaged it herself out of fear, screaming at him to leave her alone because being physically close after years of sexual harassment gave her an intense panic attack.
Get the fuck out!
Clay replays this moment in his head where he gives her this big impassioned speech about his feelings and she goes, goes, "Why didn't you say this to me when I was alive?" Like, the idea that coming clean this way would be the one thing that would fix her? "I cost a girl her life because I was afraid to love her," Clay whispers. And no one disagrees. No one really suggests otherwise. No alternatives suggest that she would have been too broken to fix, that other factors would have still impacted her so badly that it wouldn't have mattered anyway. The show lets Clay stew in it, sit in it. "Yeah," says 13 Reasons Why. "Maybe she would still be alive if you told her that you fancied her. Maybe it is your fault." On both ends, this just seems willfully stupid.
I love you.
Why didn't you say this to me when I was alive?
On one hand, we have Clay, hopeless romantic incarnate, head over heels for Hannah, who is to say he can cure suicidal depression with a weak pound. And on the other hand, we have Hannah, a woman who flirts with being so broken that she cannot be reached, and almost playing hard to get, wanting Clay to shout her back or stay with her, specifically while telling him, "No, go away, leave me alone." Sure, some people never ask for help, some people aren't talkers, and yeah, that's super emotionally unhealthy, but the show never suggests Hannah should have spoken to anybody. Instead, it just points the finger at the characters she very explicitly left in the dark. Like, what do you want? You know, do you want Hannah to be this broken, damaged girl who is abandoned by people around her, who see that she needs help, but refuse to help her, and by extension points fingers to us as a collective to show empathy and be kind to people who come to them for help? Or do you want Hannah to be a closed-off person who fixes her problems by herself and never speaks to anyone, and isn't anyone's responsibility? And who, by extension, would it therefore be uncharacteristic of to suddenly lay the blame at everybody else's door and finally start talking with the explicit intention of dying just to spite them? Like, what is she, you know? Number 4. The show is a vapid, profitable attempt for Netflix to look like they care. Okay, so we've discussed the old state of 13 Reasons Why, the scenes that were kept in for 2 years, but now we'll discuss the after, the cleanup. So if you watch 13 Reasons Why nowadays, it starts with a short piece done by the actors of the series, out of character of course, where they let you know that the show tackles real-world topics and difficult subjects, and to reach out to a friend or trusted adult if you need any help with the issues represented in the show. I mean, they don't really show many trustable adults in the show, so I don't get that, but whatever. It's an interesting approach. Having seen the series pre-controversy and post-controversy, there's a lot of effort made in hindsight to sanitize the show's image. But with this multi-minute segment, the show is pitching itself as several things. 1, something that sheds light on topics and sparks discussion. 2, by extension, an educational and demonstrative tool. And 3, something that is honest and accurate about showing us real-world issues. These fairly bold claims mean that we can judge the show on harsher criteria. The service it's doing, how effective it is, and whether it lives up to the standard it sets. Standards set 2 years later, I remind you, so there was plenty of time for them to calibrate their message. A lot of people argue this show isn't supposed to be educational, it's entertainment. But with the addition of these pre-episode disclaimer scenes, where they very explicitly tell us that they want to do a public good and start dialogue and shed light on these topics, the show kind of categorically confirms to us what its intentions are. Even if those intentions weren't there from the beginning, their attempt to whitewash their intentions have accidentally given us on-paper intentions. We can't hide behind "it was all a show" or "it's all entertainment" excuses. 13 Reasons Why tells us that it isn't just a show, and we are fully allowed to now grade it on that basis. So this segment gives us a lovely little URL that we can take a look at. 13reasonswhy.info. Now, 13reasonswhy.info redirects to wannatalkaboutit.com, and let's have a look at this. Immediately, what you see is the Netflix logo and branding. It is a basic WordPress site with the font and colours slightly tweaked. And I mean, it's usually fairly easy to disguise a WordPress site. Sure, you know, you get basic templates, but you can add your own flair to stand out. And don't tell me Netflix doesn't have a team of web designers, but they made no effort here. You can see the cookie cutter out of the box toolkit they give you with a very loose overhaul. Okay, I thought, I'm judging a book by its cover. Let's actually investigate. So I clicked Things to Bear in Mind and was immediately advertised many of Netflix's shows for some reason, including Blonde, the Marilyn Monroe biopic, which, good grief, did not do that woman any proper service. Fantastic one to rep the brand there, guys, right there on the front page. I clicked the sexual violence and relationship abuse link and was shown a video. Oh, I thought, is this going to be a useful video? video I can use to gain insight into the signs and symptoms to look for? No, it's a round table with the cast of Luckiest Girl Alive, a show now streaming on Netflix with no subtitles, a few minutes long. Below that, to Netflix's credit, yeah, there are some useful PDFs on what to look for, but this is such a cynical view of sexual assault. It's like the priority was solely on pitching tangentially related shows, and then you scroll down and it gives you printable pamphlets on what consent is. This is honestly an embarrassing attempt at being some line of defense for suicidal viewers. Mr. Porter represents the systemic failure of schools and institutions to catch suicidal teenagers before they fall through the cracks, and is dragged as a joke throughout the series. But I do have to wonder, if a character was ever made to parody the incessant need of Netflix to capitalize on mental health struggles in some of the worst ways I have ever seen, what kind of sleazy executive would that look like? Anyway, thanks for watching. This was a long one. I initially intended to cover all 4 seasons in one video, but I ended up having absolutely tons to say about season 1. I hope that you enjoyed it regardless. I have a few ongoing projects, and technically the other episodes do fall under the Patreon community goals, so we will keep going with this as and when we can. If you want to see other Patreon accessible goodies, check out the links in the description box below. Otherwise, drop a like on the video and subscribe if you enjoyed it. We cover all sorts of stuff on this channel, movies, TV, video games, and if that sounds like your kind of thing, catch me here for more. We recently hit our goal for covering every movie on tier 1 of the disturbing movie iceberg, so that'll be great fun. See you in that one if you like dipping your toes into a journey of disgust. Otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Have an amazing week, and I'll see you soon.